Welcome to this section. The name of this section is Mindfulness, Impermanence, and Suffering in the Buddhist Tradition. I'm Sandy from Hong Kong. I'll be the panelist of this session. Welcome, everyone. According to the schedule, am I the first one to present my paper? Yes, okay. So I'll be the first one to present my paper. I'll try to keep it short and concise. Okay. Yes. So the presentation topic for my presentation topic is experiential learning online, practicing mindfulness for understanding classics and sustainability. Before we start, I'm sorry, it's technical issue. Okay. So before we designed the experiential learning program, we had to understand students' challenges. So I read from their reflection and find some clues. And because of the pandemic, all of our classes were held online through Zoom for more than a year in Chinese University of Hong Kong. Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a lecturer in General Education Foundation Program from Office of University General Education in the Chinese University of Hong Kong. My background was actually biochemistry, but now I got some changes in my development path, and we found that some students has reported that they felt isolated. They said that learning is already difficult, particularly when it become online. It is even harder because they cannot ask the student sitting next to them when it is in online class. Apart from the academic pressure, Hong Kong is also a place with it's a fast-paced city, and people walk really so fast along the street. Sometimes we are always afraid of staying behind the flow. The tedious and busy life is also another source of pressure for our students. And also the lack of communication to interact with people, with other students as well. So in this presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction of our General Education Foundation program and how I plan the experiential learning program on mindfulness and how I deliver the workshops. For our school, we got two compulsory general education courses. One of them is called Endowed with Humanity, another one is Endowed with Nature. So students were required to read some core texts, some classics, and then they have to reflect on some everlasting questions like what is life, what is truth, how to pursue good happiness, how to deal with suffering, all sorts of questions. And I myself, I'm teaching Endowed with Nature. It involves some science core text. But for the mindfulness, the title of mindfulness, it is more related to Heart Sutra in Dialogue with Humanity. The Heart Sutra was found in we've just select the Heart Sutra in with some explanations by Thich Nhat Hanh in his book The Heart of Understanding, and actually mindfulness is somehow related to some texts in the science core text curriculum. In Search of Memory by Eric Kandel, he talks about the role of amygdala in our brain, which is responsible for dealing with stress and tension. And for Silence Brain by Rachel Carson, she emphasized on the importance of the web of life and how we are connected with other lives in nature. To design the experiential learning of mindfulness, we want to pursue these outcomes. We hope students can experience the moment and feel the connection with nature and being more focused to deal with the challenges in life. And also, we wish to enhance the understanding of the text because we just learn, we read the text and then we come to class for discussion during the two courses. And somehow we just learn the theoretical understanding of the text, but without any subjective experience. So we want them to have some subjective experience for a better integration of ideas with the text. And then we also want to suggest that we bring their awareness of the sustainable development goal. And I will share some reflection from students from their reflection, and also some of my reflections, and also finally the conclusion. So we start from the Heart Sutra, the first few sentences of the Chinese translation. I have adopted the translation by Thich Nhat Hanh in year 2014. In the first few sentences, Avalokiteshvara, while practicing deeply with the insight that brings us to the other shore, suddenly discovered that all of the five skandhas are equally empty. And with this realization, he overcame all ill being. Thich Nhat Hanh has explained emptiness with interbeing, which suggests that we are all connected. All things are connected, and it is an emptiness of a separate self, separate self. And then it also indicate uncertainties. Nothing is permanent. Things are changing. So in order to understand emptiness, we have to gain the ability to understand it, to feel it, to suddenly discover it. So I decided to focus on suddenly discover. How can we gain the opportunity to observe the emptiness? All right, but it is very difficult. Even myself, even I practiced meditation for a few years, I'm still learning how to understand emptiness. And because with according to the Heart Sutra, with this realization, he can overcome all ill being or suffering. So we hope the students can have learn some methods to deal with their own sufferings. So the design of program is as follows. We have decided two micro modules, a short video clips about 10 minutes. One of them was on engaged Buddhism, and another one on mindfulness practice, and also the scientific basis of mindfulness. And after watching these two videos, they can join some workshops. The first one is a two-section workshop named Experiencing Mindfulness A and B. So the aim of this workshop is to use different activities and teach them different ways of learning, of applying mindfulness. Another one is called A Taste of Zen in Tea, which focus on tea brewing and brewing and drinking. So in these sessions, we make use of tea as a meditation tool. And after joining the sections, they have to write with a reflective essay of no less than 200 words in Canton and Chinese or English. Okay, the first micro modules is about engaged Buddhism. This episode has explored the theoretical foundation of Buddhism's pursuit of social development and justice, and also introduced the historical background why Thich Nhat Hanh modernized Buddhism. And the second one is about the principle and methods of mindfulness practice, and how what is the scientific basis behind, particularly when we practice mindfulness, it not just changed the function of amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and hippocampus, it also changed the structure of these parts. So students said that, watching the video about it, and then he agreed that happiness is not in the distant future, but present. I'm really surprised for that. And I'm going to focus on the development of workshops, because how I design and try to execute the workshops. So for each workshop, there were around 100 participants, because we have 7 teachers and we bring about 15 students all together in the online workshops. And during the workshops, I didn't spend much time. Didn't spend any time in explaining the text, because this part was left for the micro modules and also for the classroom. And I introduced some basic concept about mindfulness and give them some quick guide on practice. We practice together with my vocal and visual guidance. I would demonstrate how to move our hands or so. And we encourage students to share their feeling and also listen to others without judgment. Okay, so the first part of the workshop start from the basic concept and guide on mindfulness practice. So I try to use different graphics to attract attention of the students and try to use some short sentence and with a concise message. Just like this one, I explained the definition of mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh and also Jean Kabat-Zinn, who is a professor in medicine, who founded the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And my expectation to students, we want you to bring nothing away, but to let go of your worries about future, some over-tense muscle and burden, and also some instructions in dealing with challenges. When you are having a struggle, face it, accept it, deal with it, and then let it go. Well, it was actually suggested by Master Shen Yan. He was the founder of Dharma Drum Mountain in Taiwan. His guidelines on Chan practice, or another term is called Zen practice, practicing mindfulness, practicing mindfulness meditation, is to follow this quote: your mind stays with you wherever you are at any moment. Be aware when you relax and relax your whole body. So I include all these in the briefing session. This is a screen capture from one of the workshop. I suggest I raise out the issue about sustainable development goals, and among all the goals, actually many of them were involved with covers lives, other lives. For example, life underwater, life on land, no poverty, about education or something. We usually care about people around us, but we forget that we should care about ourselves first. So the third one, good health and well-being, is in how to enhance the good health and well-being of people around us. We have to make sure that we are in good health and we are in well-being. We are having a good well-being, right? So I remind students to focus on themselves first, so that we can bring happiness to yourself and also other beings. So this is one screen capture during the workshop. Right. The second part is to we start to practice together. It is to tame the jumping monkey. Mingyu Rinpoche, Mingyu Rinpoche, a Tibetan meditation master, has suggested that our mind is like jumping monkey. When I design the activities, I start from dynamic motion to being static, because when we just sit down, we have an agitated mind, and it is difficult and impossible for us to start the meditation immediately. So I start from some walking meditation. We just walk on the spot with bare feet. So I ask students to focus on the feeling of the feet, how the temperature, the texture of the floor, and how the dust stuck to their feet, the feeling of the dust sticking to their feet. Okay, I from strong to subtle body sensation to from some big movement to small movement, and then we start to calm ourselves. And the next step would be there was a singing section. We sing together in the Zoom program, in the Zoom section. And it was not a good outcome, because we just follow our own speed. So you can imagine the outcome was not good. But it is not important. The process is more important. So the students said that when everyone is singing, I felt happier because we are sharing the particular moment together. It's not about the outcome, but also the way we switch on the camera, we sing together. So it is one way to focus on our our action, and then we start to sit down, and then I ask students to feel their breath, follow their breath, and then sit and did a sitting meditation for a few minutes. So some students said that the perception of touch and sound seems to be intensified. I have to speed up, sorry. And then the last part is to meditate using our five senses. For the first workshop, I asked students to listen to a singing bowl video clip, and then they focus on the sensation of their ear. And a student said that, oh, originally the sound was so scratchy, but later on I fall asleep unknowingly. And the second activity was a banana meditation. Actually, I took reference from Thich Nhat Hanh. He used tangerine, but imagine that if you peel a tangerine in front of the computer, it could be a bit messy. So I've changed it to banana. And I asked the students to spend like 20 minutes in experiencing the banana, feeling the texture of it, smell different part of it, and hearing the sound of peeling the skin, and then taste it slowly, and generally swallow it. Slowly swallow it. And the student got very good awareness. They found that the sweetness of the banana is eluded from the inside, and not all parts of the banana are sweet. And students said that the peeling sound of the banana peel was so soothing, like an ASMR recording. And also, finally, the banana peel, it seems like it is a waste, but actually we can put it into soil and it becomes fertilizer. Last activity is about tea drinking. So I remind them to treasure every moment. By introducing the tea wheel, we know Chinese view towards the nature. Heaven, man, and earth. We represent different part of this, cover both three talents. Chinese people reject to separate man from the nature. And I ask them to do one thing at each moment, use only one hand. So this experience actually make use of our five senses. I demonstrate how to brew the tea, and then when we grab the tea, and then when we pour the water, we listen to the sound, and then we grab the tea, we feel the texture, the temperature of the cup, and then we smell the taste. We smell the tea, and then we drink it. Yes. So I asked the student, when was the last time you wholeheartedly brew yourself a cup of tea? And one student has mentioned that the sense of ritual, we should treat ourselves ceremonially. They were some of them said they were impressed by the sense of ritual, because they seldom brew themselves a cup of tea in this way, in this serious and respectful way. So she said that, oh, we should treat ourselves consciously and seriously and take care and respect our own feeling. I heard from some colleagues that some students become so serious in this part when I asked this question, when was the last time you wholeheartedly brew yourself a cup of tea? And some of them got red eyes and it almost broke into tears. Yeah. So about the feeling of body and mind, in general, they found that they are lack of body awareness, and that they feel like they need to take rest, and they can get relaxed and less anxious and more calm, and even with a better mood. A student said that, at least I know that I'm not as relaxed as I thought. I think it is very good. It is okay not to get relaxed, but it is very good that he know he was not relaxed. The awareness is very precious. Some other reflection from student. I just got two more slices. I'm sorry. A student said that grades are temporary and the challenges ahead of me are endless. So it is important. I cannot change the world, but I have to manage my time and spare out some time for a break. Okay, it's important to take a rest before under this hostile and bustle city. And having all the worries on exam, assignments, internship, future career, thoughts, or world issues, I've never really put my time to be aware of the present. Very good awareness. And other students apply the practice of meditation in other aspects, like brewing coffee, reading a book slowly, and try to forget the worries and get a temporary relief, etc. So I like to conclude the presentation with this slide. I'm very, very impressed by this student. He said that we can change the situation of the pandemic with our words, deeds, and thoughts. Under the pandemic, actually, we can do something like maintaining our hygiene, and also we can change the injustice in society. And also, we should try to understand each other without hatches. Like Albert Einstein said, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. And I'm really impressed by this sharing. So the final slide, my reflection. I feel like there is a true need for us to promote mindfulness in school, not only in secondary school but also in tertiary, in college and etc. And a kindergarten. I hope so, because our students really need to learn some way to deal with their struggles and their challenges. And for mindfulness meditation itself, it is essential to feel it by ourselves. So learning by doing is very important. And from this workshop, from this program, I feel like it's really effective. And a lot of students could participate in a single workshop when it is online. However, I got weak interaction with students, and I feel it very difficult to observe their response because I have to focus on delivering the content. The last word, I wish to sow some good seeds in their heart. Apart from achieving the sustainable development goals or facilitate understanding of text or so, I think this is most important. I don't know, maybe one day this seed could blossom into flowers. But I really treasure what I'm doing right now, and I hope in the near future we can resume to face-to-face workshops and I can have more interaction with the students. Thank you very much for your patience. I stop here. Sorry, I overrun a lot. Thank you. Okay. Shall we finish all the discussion before the Q&A section? Is it okay? Okay. So let me introduce the next speaker, Professor Frank Hoffman. Yes, is he here? Is he here? Professor Frank Hoffman. The title of his presentation is a Sutta on Global Warming. Is Professor Frank Hoffman here?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Miriam again. I don't think that he is here, and I think that's okay. So.
Oh, okay. So let's move on to the next speaker, Professor Michael Nichols. His presentation topic is When Sickness is Not Sickness. Let's give him a big hand. A warm welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I can feel it virtually, if nothing else. So I appreciate that. So I'm very glad to be part of this panel, and thank you for that wonderful paper to start us off with, Sandy. I very much enjoyed the ideas, and I look forward to the discussion. So a little bit about my background. I'm a professor of religious studies at Martin University in Indianapolis, and so my background is with a specialization in Buddhism, but also broad comparison. This paper is going to be about particularly a Buddhist topic, but I've also published widely, and right now I want to put a little quick plug up for a book that I just released on religion and myth in the popular culture texts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is a much broader look at the different humanistic themes you can find in the Marvel films. But this particular paper is about the issue of pandemic in a Buddhist core text. And I'm going to read the paper. I don't have the engaging slides, so I apologize for that, but hopefully the ideas will still carry through. So from Buddhism's earliest period in ancient India, the fact of illness and disease has been of critical importance. According to stories of Siddhartha Gautama's life in texts such as the Pali Nidanakatha and Sanskrit Buddhacharita, it was the sights of old age, sickness, and death that compelled the young prince to leave his sheltered palace life to seek out a remedy for life's distress. After achieving awakening as the Buddha, the centrality of disease is enshrined in the first of the Four Noble Truths, Sarvam Dukkam, all is pain and suffering. From this perspective, life is shot through with impermanence, sickness, and disease, making stable happiness nothing but an illusion, a fairy tale we tell ourselves. Though stemming from approximately 25 millennia in the past, these teachings of Buddhism seem entirely prescient for a time of pandemic and disruption such as we are experiencing, with millions infected, sickened, and perished from COVID-19. The teaching that sickness is the prevalent aspect of the human condition would not seem a tough sell in this environment, in other words. Yet the Buddhist tradition is multitudinous. And as it branched into new forms and sects, alternate views, even of cardinal principles like the concept of sarvam dukkam, begin to emerge, particularly within the schools of the Mahayana. That movement was characterized by such teachings as non-duality, the emptiness or voidness or interbeing of all phenomena, the preeminence of the bodhisattva path, and the decreased importance of monastic vows in favor of lay practice, just to give a short list. So extensive was the shift in ideas between earlier Buddhism and the Mahayana that it has been termed the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, a true revolution in Buddhist teaching. One key text of the Mahayana is the Vimalakirti Sutra, composed between the 1st and 3rd centuries of the Common Era in Chinese, Tibetan, and Sanskrit versions. These different versions having been translated by scholars such as Thomas Clearly, Etienne Lamott, John McRae, Robert Thurman, and Burton Watson. For sheer influence among later Buddhist traditions, particularly East Asian forms of the religion, the Vimalakirti Sutra ranks among other Buddhist classics such as the Lotus and Diamond Sutras, delivering stunning discourses on the meaning of non-duality and emptiness especially. As such, the text revisits, redraws, even reimagines certain binaries, most particularly between the supposed opposites of health and sickness. By reading this text, a core text within the span of Buddhist and Asian religions in general, I offer the lessons here briefly of the Vimalakirti Sutra on sickness as a reminder in the midst of a pandemic of ways to respond to disease that transcend words and even action. As the title suggests, the text is positioned as the teaching of Vimalakirti, a householder who has attained awakening and comprehends the meaning of non-duality to such a degree that he eschews previously held Buddhist notions of monastic refinement and purity. He marries and has a family, partakes of alcohol and rich foods, visits bars and brothels, all to the end of realizing and embodying the inescapable conclusion that if all phenomena are interdependent and void or empty, there can be no distinction between nirvana, the extinction of desires, and the world of desire itself, to exist one and in the other. Believing that the Buddha's various monastic followers are not sufficiently trained in this truth, Vimalakirti determines to impart this teaching to them. Using his perfect mastery of non-duality, Vimalakirti has the ability to assume any state he wishes, so he manifests himself as sick, knowing that the Buddha's followers will be compelled to visit him in his convalescence. The Buddha immediately perceives Vimalakirti's state and asks his attendants to visit the householder. One after another refuses, however, giving instances in the past when Vimalakirti's superior understanding of the Dharma has embarrassed them, or otherwise left them at a loss for words. Eventually, the disciple Manjushri, despite his own misgivings, decides to take up the task, and he will visit Vimalakirti. At this time, Manjushri is followed by a retinue of other Buddhists and even divine beings who anticipate that this is going to be the opportunity for a superb teaching moment. Upon arriving, Manjushri asks Vimalakirti about the nature of the householder's sickness. He replies in the following way: "My sickness comes from ignorance and the thirst for existence, and will last as long as do the sicknesses of all living beings. All living beings free from sickness, I also would not be sick. When the only son of a merchant is sick, both his parents become sick on account of the sickness of their son. Just so, Bodhisattva loves all living beings as if each were his only child. He becomes sick when they are sick and is cured when they are cured. You ask me whence comes my sickness? The sicknesses of the Bodhisattva come from great compassion." Following on this exchange, Manjushri probes further on the exact nature of Vimalakirti's sickness and even inquires as to how to provide consolation for an ill Bodhisattva. Vimalakirti replies thus: "Encourage his empathy for all living beings on account of his own sickness, his remembrance of suffering experienced from beginningless time, and his consciousness of working for the welfare of living beings. Encourage him not to be distressed, but to manifest the roots of virtue, to maintain the primal purity and the lack of craving, and thus to always strive to become the king of healers who can cure all sicknesses." At this point, though, the conversation between the two has skirted an issue which soon becomes central. Given the teaching of non-duality, is sickness even real? Manjushri provokes that discussion by asking how a bodhisattva ought to deal with his illness, to which Vimalakirti replies that the elimination of sickness comes about when one eliminates egoism and possessiveness, which can be done through realizing non-duality, that, quote, both self and non-self are void, empty. Neither is established in reality. One who sees such equality makes no difference between sickness and voidness. His sickness is itself voidness, and that sickness as voidness is itself void. Now, in a way, just as we can see with many teachings of the Mahayana, this follows very logically from earlier Buddhist insights, namely the early Buddhist precept of Anathema, or no self. Due to the constantly changing nature of physical and mental forms, there is no permanent soul or I to which one can cling. Without an I, there is no ego. And without an ego or an I, you cannot support the statement, I am sick. All beings are sick, and all beings are well, for both states are void, empty of permanent reality. Now, during a pandemic where millions have been struck with COVID-19, other millions have died, and the spread of the disease has caused widespread economic distress, the rhetoric that ultimately sickness is unreal and can be rendered void by a shift in perception is not likely to be greeted with overwhelming enthusiasm. However, even while layered around an uncompromising commitment to the truth of non-duality and the emptiness of all phenomena, the text's approach to sickness is in fact subtle and practical in ways that provide lessons for responding to the pandemic. First, one could see great worth in focusing on Vimalakirti's declaration that if one being is sick, the bodhisattva shall be also. From this point of view, sickness is not an event that happens to one, but instead that happens to all. The illness of one being should be experienced as an illness that happens to all beings. Consequently, this leads to a more inclusive view of illness, and that itself would lead to more pronounced collective efforts, creating more opportunities for communities themselves to heal. Second, as we saw, Vimalakirti speaks of considering one's own illness as the root of empathy for the illness of others. Far from rendering sickness as unreal, this provides a way for disease, even potentially catastrophic disease that one suffers, to be a foundation for training or self-understanding, and as a way to live in deep compassion for the plights of other beings. In this way, sickness may not be conquered or rendered irrelevant, but nonetheless possibly transcended, as one uses it to develop a profound interconnected understanding. Finally, though not related specifically to the text dialogues explicitly on sickness, there is a passage later in the sutra that reveals yet another lesson we can nevertheless take away on dealing with illness or the illnesses of others in a challenging time. This passage focuses most definitely on non-duality in a very plain way. The attendants of the Buddha who have followed Manjushri to his session are now taking turns attempting themselves to define non-duality. Padmavyuha, for instance, argues that the absence of ideation is non-duality. Chandrotra determines that rather it is equanimity that leads to non-duality. Manjushri, who, as we've seen, has had the benefit of special instruction with Vimalakirti, chides these others for giving explanations that themselves are dualistic. He instead says that, quote, to indicate nothing and to designate nothing, that is non-duality. Prompted by this exchange, they ask Vimalakirti to assert himself, to assess their views of non-duality and then offer his own perspective. But in response, we are told Vimalakirti kept his silence, saying nothing at all. As the text has repeatedly tied sickness with non-duality, we can take this incident as yet another possible lesson for dealing with disease. Unlike the other acolytes of the Buddha, Vimalakirti demonstrates that any words, any commentary, in this instance, represents a descent into the world of dualism and binaries, hence his silence. Instead, and indeed, the only proper response is silence. But importantly, not absence. His silent presence, like voidness or emptiness itself, among his fellow Buddhists is not negative, but instead quite affirmative of their solidarity. We can take from this, I believe, potentially, the lesson that when confronted with the anguish and terror of very profound sickness, either as a society or even an individual with whom we are conversing who has been stricken by illness, sometimes there are no words. And Vimalakirti's silence shows that we need not have the right words to say. Sometimes a quiet presence can be just as comforting and even enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nichols. Here comes to the Q&A section. So is there any question for Professor Nichols and me? Is there any question? Yes.
Good morning. I'm David.
Hi.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I actually have a question that for both of you. I'm very interested in the notion of emptiness or void. So I'm wondering if you could share with me, I hate to say this, what is the word or word cluster or cluster of words that is being translated as empty? And if you could cut across Chinese and Sanskrit or whatever other languages you'd like to share, I would be appreciative.
Okay. So this is the Chinese character. I type it in the chat box. Its pronunciation is called hong. Well, actually, it means nothing in Chinese, but actually, the emptiness to my understanding, the emptiness in Heart Sutra doesn't mean nothing, but it means uncertainty. Things keep on changing. There is no permanent existence of all the things. So even though it is in Chinese, our understanding of this word home is different from the true meaning. And also home also means there is a lack of independent self, because we cannot exist without depending on other things. If we have no if without our parents, we cannot be present. And without a farmer, without sunlight, without water, we cannot have banana. So all things exist depending on other things. So all things are connected. So we have to be grateful for what we have, to my understanding. And also, well, when we try to blame other people, we, according to what Thich Nhat Hanh has said, we are actually connected interbeing. We are part of the reason why other peoples are being bad. For example, he mentioned the story of a private had raped a girl and the girl commit suicide in Thailand. I forgot. So usually we blame the private. We want to kill him or put him into jail. But well, when we meditate and we know that if there is a baby living in his environment, and after 25 years he could become a private again. So the society and every one of us got the responsibility to cause this to happen. So Thich Nhat Hanh said that, please call me by my true name. He has a poem, and I'm the girl, and I'm also the private, and I'm everyone. So there is no single name for me. So this is my understanding of emptiness. Thank you.
Could you, Sandy, could you suggest a transliteration of Cajon?
So sorry. Could you please repeat again?
I'm sorry, could you suggest a transliteration into Roman characters?
Roman characters.
Or English characters? Yeah.
Okay. I think. Okay.
Just what I'm not. It's not a.
Okay. As
Hong.
home. in Cantonese.
In Cantonese. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Nichols, yes.
So I put into the chat, my background is primarily in the Indian languages. And so within Sanskrit, you have shunyata is usually what is translated as empty or void. And in terms of explaining the concept, I have much to add to Sandy's great explanation that primarily it's empty, not in the terms of nothingness, but empty in terms of being empty of own existence, that all things are interbeing. And so that's the construct of the independent, stable, permanent I is what's broken down by the notion of emptiness, that it's empty of that sort of permanence. So once you are able to appreciate the interconnection of all beings in the moment and then over the vast periods of time that Buddhism usually speaks of, given the rounds of rebirth that all beings go through, that we are all part of the larger drama together, and all things are intermingled and intermixed. And so I am you, you are me. Over time, we are all beings, all one together. And so that's why the one with the proper understanding of non-duality and emptiness will experience the sufferings of others and the joys of others as one's own at the same time, because of this interconnection of all things.
Thank you. I have a question for Professor Nichols. In your sharing, you've mentioned non-duality, and well, so when sickness is not sickness, so how would you suggest your student if he or she got COVID-19, how to view his current situation, or how to deal with that suffering, or when his or her family member got sick? How would you suggest him or her to understand and deal with the suffering? Thank you.
Oh, well, yes. And unfortunately, that's a situation that's I've been in a few times over the past multiple months of having students who are dealing either with their own infection with COVID-19 or a family member. And the very first thing that I do is try to just express compassion and try to model compassion for them, that we will be there. Myself as an individual and another institution that I represent wants to put their health first. And so we always will try to find some way to extend whatever period of time they need so they can first put their health and their safety first. And so I think it's recognizing that in that situation with a diagnosis of something that can be as frightening as COVID-19, that concerns of school, concerns of assignments, and all those sorts of things need to be put on the back burner, and we don't worry or talk about those other things. It's what can be done for you, what can be done for your family member, what are the things that you need that we can reach out to you for. So it's reacting first with that compassion is at least, it feels to me, the most human thing to do, and that's the path that I've chosen to take. And I've been very, very happy that the people that I work with have tended just naturally, without a whole lot of discussion between us, to react in the same way. So I can at least speak from my own experience and the experience that I've been around. That's kind of it's not a formal program, it's not a formal action plan, but that's at least the way that we've initially sought to deal with it.
Thank you for your sharing. It's really, under the pandemic, somehow, in order to make sense of the current situation, we can get some insight from the classics, from the old wisdoms. Yes. Yes, thank you. Is there other questions for us?
I have a question for Dr. Nichols, and then it's about the Vimalakerti. When he asks his associates to visit, when the Buddha asks his associates to visit Vimalakirti, who is supposedly sick, and they won't go, it seems to me that that is sort of, I would like to know how you feel about what that being a sort of a sickness, because it's an egoistic thing, because they don't want to be embarrassed. But how would you, I think we've all been taught that humility is a positive thing. So how would you balance that?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that's a great point, and that sickness can be seen as a multivalent thing here. And so the initial reluctance, not wanting to be made a fool of, not wanting to have their own shortcomings of knowledge revealed, shows definitely a lack of humility. And I think that if we take a step back from the text for a moment and kind of think about the wider context of what's happening, that this is being a Mahayana text, and a lot of these Mahayana texts are positioning themselves against earlier Buddhist traditions. And so that reluctance, I think we can see maybe as allegorical for how to portray other Buddhists who are not buying into the Mahayana path, and trying to, in a way, satirically show how there are Buddhists who are reluctant to realize the limits of their own understanding. So you'll encounter those sorts of Buddhists. You'll encounter other Buddhists who are more open to this new kind of teaching. But I think that there is a bit of a sectarian element in there with the portrayal of these other figures, as a way to talk about some of the seams that are apparent between different forms of Buddhism, as these different kinds of Buddhism are interacting with one another. And I think if we take a step back from that context and want to think about the ways that the text can be seen as more universally instructive, I think that you're making a great point, that you can see it as a way, don't be so much like these bodhisattvas and these other attendants who are not willing to realize the limits of their knowledge. Be more like, say, a figure like Manjushri, who is uncomfortable with the idea, but he nevertheless goes, and his understanding is richer at the end because of it. So I think that it works on a lot of different levels. So that's a great question that you're bringing up.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, I was wondering if you could say more about silence in general, especially since we've probably all experienced an extra amount of silence from our students in Zoom and sometimes from faculty in faculty meetings.
Absolutely. Within Buddhism, going back to the example of Buddha himself, there is the concept of the noble silence, that silence is representative in some ways of emptiness. And emptiness not being nothingness, there's still potentially a lot happening there, that it is a area that is potentially creative and productive. I'm going to go back, if I want to get personal for a moment. One of the aspects of my graduate training when I was doing my doctoral work was an ethnographic work on a Zen temple that was near, I went to Northwestern University in Evanston. Nearby was a Zen temple that I did a ethnography at as part of my doctoral training. And so in the active practice at this Zen temple, silence was not only occurrent, but it was also sought after. Silence was the domain. And if there wasn't silence, there was a problem. This was the thing that was actually pursued. And what a wonderful corrective to a standard where silence is the enemy. Then, in the classroom, whether it is a Zoom classroom or it's a face-to-face classroom, particularly as a beginning teacher, I saw silence as being deadly. And as soon as it appeared, I had to try to move to fill it. And I found that whether it was Zoom or in-person classes, that the more that I welcomed silence, giving students the ability to pause and to interact when they were ready, that the richer that eventual interaction might have been. And it's not always the case. It can also indicate that students are not engaged or have some sort of a problem or issue that they want to work out with you. But I've learned to not fear silence in the same way. And I think maybe some of that comes from that past study, that past acquaintance with what silence can mean. as a productive area within different kinds of Buddhism. And I have no idea if that answer has helped with your question or not, but that's immediately what comes to mind when you talk about silence.
I feel the same way about silence in the physical classroom. I've been struggling with it a little bit in the Zoom classroom, especially if their cameras are off and I'm not even sure if they're there or if they're on other devices.
That's a very true problem for me.
Because there's another going to fill that void. Yeah.
So in during the lessons or during the workshop that I just mentioned, I asked the student to turn on the camera. Particularly during tutorial discussion, if they just switch off the camera, I really don't know whether they exist or not. But well, when go back to noble silence, as mentioned by Michael, I remember when I attend some meditation camp. Yes, we have to maintain a noble silence, and I know the reason was to reduce our conversation, reduce our communication with the people around us, so that we can put our attention back to our body sensation, to our inner self. Even though maybe there are some posters around, some volunteers would cover the poster, the words with cloth or paper, so that to reduce the input of information through our eyes. And yes, so I think it is a kind of it is a bit difficult for me because I tend to speak a lot in my daily life. So keeping myself silent is quite challenging because yeah, usually I'm used to teach, so I speak a lot. But it is really a good way to go back to focus back on my inner self. And yes, going back to the classroom problem, sometimes I ask the student to respond by typing, even though or during the lecture, because it's a one-way lecture, one-way presentation. So I don't ask them to turn on the camera. So usually I just talk to a black screen. I would pretend that they should be listening. so it doesn't cause a big problem for me. I will ask them questions, and then when I see them react they type something in the chat box, I know they are listening. So in this way, I feel like I'm still connected with the students. Thank you for your question. Yes, any other questions for us?
Yeah, I have a question for you. My name's Andrea, and I teach in Colorado, so there are a lot of meditators in my city, and I find that many of my students are interested in Eastern texts. But I'm sort of curious about whether you two encounter obstacles when you're teaching these texts. I'm in a Great Books program, so I'll teach, the Tao Te Ching, or I'll teach Genesis and many other religious texts. And I find a special difficulty for me, and this might be partly because I'm in an engineering program, is that my students are so scientifically minded that they have a hard time getting into the mindset of these texts, or really starting to feel out the worldview that I want them to inhabit. And I find that because so many of my students are interested in meditation and yoga for its health reasons, they're sort of part of the cult of health, that it's difficult for them to shed certain prejudices about what's going to happen or what it is that they're doing. And I'm just curious if either of you has any advice about how to deal with that. I would say probably another obstacle is something like their individualism, right? Like it seems as though they're interested in meditation and yoga in part as if I'm going to be really ungenerous, it's a kind of spiritual hedonism. Maybe a more generous statement would be to say that they're looking for some sort of authenticity and they're interested in mindfulness as a way to finding that. But I think there's a point where just some of these ideas get absorbed into this very Western mindset, and it's very difficult for them to break out of that. And I'm just curious about whether or not either of you has any advice about how to deal with that, or certain texts that would be good introductions to different ways of thinking. I mean, Michael, it seems like the text you've used is a great way of introducing different ideas, but I'm just curious if either of you could say more about that, the obstacles to teaching means.
Want to go first, Sandy?
Yeah, you first, or me first?
Yeah, you can go ahead. That's fine.
Well, actually, I'm not teaching the course with humanity text. I'm actually teaching the course with using scientific core text. So, Andrea, you have mentioned the Eastern culture, the context of the East. It reminds me of Joseph Needham's The Science and Civilization in China, because he the shorter Science and Civilization in China, because he introduced the Chinese view towards the nature. Well, when compared to the modern science perspective, we focus on the 5 elements and the yin yang, the 2 fundamental forces, and we make use of associative thinking in explaining the phenomenon happening around us. So in Chinese view towards the nature, we refuse to separate man from the nature, and we view the universe as a vast organism. We are well. There was one quote in Chunqiu Fanlu, in a Chinese ancient text, said that the heaven got yin yang, and we human being got yin yang. When the yin energy start to flourish in the earth, our yin energy will follow. So it is a very good representation that we are closely connected with the nature. So so this is one text that I would suggest. It's not too long, it's short, but it's a bit brief. Just a general understanding of Chinese view towards the nature. And concerning the students' interest in yoga and meditation just for health reason or for interest, I think it is a very good entry point to introduce mindfulness, because mindfulness could be practiced in any time at different ways. The point is to focus on the present and to without judgment, which is to when you do the thing, you just wholeheartedly doing the thing. Well, for example, if I'm eating and I'm watching the TV, it's not mindful. When I'm eating, I focus on the taste of the rice, and then I know the feeling of rice in my mouth, and then I know the taste, the temperature of the food, and that is being mindful. So when they practice yoga or practice sports or so, they can still apply this method, so they can have a better understanding of what mindfulness is, if they can just apply this mindset in doing yoga or sports. Thank you. Yes, Michael.
And so in short answer to your question, yes, I have experienced all of those different mentalities and approaches to students who come in, for instance, when I've taught an Asian philosophy class, came in because they wanted to learn about yoga, having a perception of yoga as being physical fitness, because they wanted to learn about mindfulness, but primarily because of the things that they thought that would do for them, this very utilitarian approach. And students who, when they read the first bit of the Tao Te Ching, just threw their hands up and said, "This is nonsense. I have no idea how to make the heads or tails of this, because it's so, in their words, strange to their way of thinking." So I've experienced all of it. So Do I have a perfect approach to try to break those things down? I don't think so, but I have developed a couple of different strategies that I use. The first is to just really, really dig deep into a variety of different texts. So besides the Tao Te Ching, which I found to be a wonderful barometer of human personality. There are some people who take to it and who originally are of a very, very scientific engineering background, pick it up and say, this is the book that I have been searching for all my life. And they kind of will take to task those who immediately shut it down. So there's always a wonderful discussion. I never have to worry about getting students talking when we read the Tao Te Ching, because usually the class divides pretty evenly in half between those who have that immediate reaction. So that, as well as things like the Vimalakirti Sutra. And so the number of different kinds of texts, if we can rotate through several, if there's one that really turns students off, sometimes there'll be another that can balance it out and give a window into that way of thought that is more accessible. The second thing that I've done is try to deliberately pick texts or readings that are a little bit more interdisciplinary. There's a text by Basho, a Japanese Zen poet, who wrote a travel log of his experiences just walking around Japan with haikus and different literary styles. So the use of literature is something that can bring along other students. Thich Nhat Hanh is someone that I love as well, Sandy. And so some of his books take mindfulness and make it very practical, but also connect that to the wider significance. So if they're getting both of those things at the same time, there you go. There you go.
Very much.
Sometimes that connection between those different fields provides a hook that brings students into a deeper way of thought. And I also do some experiential work as well. When we do Zen, I love introducing, usually through videos of people who spend time in Japanese monasteries, of Zen koans, the riddles that are meant to break down dualistic ways of thinking. And then I give students their own koan to wrestle with over a weekend or so. And they have to provide answers to that riddle at the end. And sometimes doing that, as well as different mindfulness training, mindful walking meditation, mindful eating. I love the example of mindfulness of making tea. I think that's great. So those kinds of embodied practices too, on top of the other things, sometimes will help to make it a little bit more real. And I also learned to be a little bit more detached in my teaching and to understand the limits of what I'm doing, that in the 8 to 16 weeks that they're going to be with me, this isn't going to be necessarily a life-changing experience. We're planting seeds here. And that I had a colleague who used to refer to it as a seed is too benign. We're planting time bombs. These are going to be intellectual time bombs that are going to go off in their brain later on in life, and they're going to see the world differently. I like seed a little better, less confrontational, right? But I think the idea still holds that expecting a revolution in this period of time is probably too much. And so when I'm less attached to the results, I find that we're all happier together. But I don't know if that helps, but that's just some of the things that I've done in the past that have had varying levels of success.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys.
Yes, I agree with Michael. Being detached to the result, because I would accept that my student will forget all I've talked about. After like 2 or 3 years, they will forget all the text. But still, I hope that maybe there must be some seed planted in their heart when, even though they forgot the content of the text or so. Later on, when they encounter some situations, they may take out the book and read it again. So you don't know when the flower will blossom. Yeah.
Sandy, what was that book? Could you say the title? I couldn't quite catch it on the image.
This one. Okay. Happy Teacher Changes the World. Actually, I took reference from this book in designing the activities being carried out in the workshops. I follow the guidelines in guiding the meditation. And also my little experience of practicing meditation in temple. So I unite my experience and also some knowledge from books in order to design the workshops. Yes. they got a lot of practical practice, like how to be aware of the breath, and how to cultivate mindfulness in classrooms, university, communities. Very practical. This is like a practical handbook. Yeah. Yes. Is there other questions for us? Yes. So.
Well, actually, related to Andrea's question and the wonderful discussion that it prompted, I'm wondering about the Eastern-Western duality.
Mm.
At a couple of levels. One, in terms of Andrea's question, it prompted me to think that in terms of a market system, even the context within which the notion of sustainable development comes from, right? I mean, on the one hand, you'd want to say, oh, well, sustainable development, it's a great thing. Well, a great thing for whom? Well, as a concept, it emerges out of the idea of, if we make our living by selling wood, we need to make certain they're trees. Yeah. And we share this, we in quotation marks, share this context, or at least this context is spreading so much so. I was, I'm wondering to what extent the notion of Eastern-Western might say it creates or supports a subject that isn't that doesn't act within the scene of out of which sustainable development emerges.
Mm.
Yeah, and the other thing is just, Sandy, in terms of your presentation, one of the things that I was immediately struck by your first slide, I thought, the student engagement interest of universities, is not just in the United States, right? Or even really see, the idea that rather than griping about how our students are insufficient and not able to do X, Y, or Z, we say, well, who's walked into the room? Yeah, I'll just call it the student engagement culture, which I actually happen to agree with. But so you're saying, what is my question? Basically, is I'm interested in teasing out the notion of the duality of Eastern and Western in terms of a shared economic context, and then also in terms of this shared university trend in university education.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Thanks for your question, David. When you mentioned the East and the West, what could be the common ground to discuss the Sustainable Development Goals? The first two words pump out in my mind is kindness and compassion. I think no matter in the East or the West, why do we have to practice Sustainable Development Goals? It should be initiated from our understanding of our kindness towards other the people around us, the organisms around us. And apart from the kindness and compassion, wisdom is also very important. If we just rely on compassion, we may do stupid things. But so wisdom is also important. Do the right thing. So I think it is the common ground connecting behind the West and the East to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know if I understand it correctly. I'm sorry. Yeah, and yes.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that at some point we might, that we as people on this planet in terms of a particular economic concept, this the duality of Eastern and Western may not be is you might say anchored in what? It's not anchored in markets.
Yeah, David, this is Stephanie, and it's still early in Arizona, but I think I get what you're talking about. And one of the things I assign at the end of my Cortex course in the spring is a chapter from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and then a chapter from David Suzuki's Sacred Balance. And in that, he talks about reconceptualizing that the environment isn't out there. We, as our speakers have talked about, I think Mike in particular, we are the air, we are the earth. And Western thinking tends to think that economics supports life. And part of the shift I hope to help my students embrace is that it's the planet that supports not life, not economics, even though we need it to function to some degree. It's not going to serve us as much as the planet. And it talks about identity being wrapped up in the trees for certain people. And if you cut down the trees just to save jobs, the jobs will go away when the trees go away. But what's worse is the identity of those people who have gotten built around the trees. So I'm not sure if I'm being very articulate, but I resonate with the split that you see in the students that are very wrapped up in the Western model. And I find those two texts partnered together work well, and it often has my students bringing up connections to the Tao from earlier in the text that we covered. I don't know, is that what you were going for on some level?
No, thank you. This actually, both of your responses were very much what I was interested in. But the one thing I would just say that Sandy, also in terms of your presentation, I heard. I don't know if it, sometimes we hear, oh, bird outside. We hear all kinds of things. I heard an attempt to make a repair of global systems. And I say global systems, but market systems. So in a curious way, I don't know what was going on up here. I should think about that some more. What happened? But I was thinking too also of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and the theory of moral sentiments, though my reading of those two texts is that they are attempting to effect a repair of the kinds of people and that are created or emerge within the context of certain market systems, all the while suggesting the market's here and it has certain benefits, namely the way of distributing wealth. I also heard in your very first sentences where you were talking about people walk very quickly. We're very busy. I was thinking, and there's a cost to that. Let's effect a repair.
Oh, how you mean how do we start to repair such practice? Or
how do we learn to live with the system that also we're dependent on?
Yeah, I guess it really takes a long time. I think from my understanding of Buddhism, we can start from ourselves first. If we can have some good changes, and then we can affect the people around us, and then but it may take a very long time in order to change the society. But I see one trend in Hong Kong is that after the pandemic, people start to care more about the needs for soul, something like for the mental health, the more emphasis on mental health when compared to the past, because in Hong Kong, it is a financial place, and people struggle for money. Using less time to gain the most money is a good job. It was the trend in Hong Kong. It was like the how to say that? Yes, it was a sign in Hong Kong. But in recent 2 years, because of the social movement, I guess you have heard of the instability of the social condition because of national law, national security law, and also the umbrella revolution, and also the pandemic. People start to rethink what are we living for? How do we find peace? Because we are under suffering. We are really under suffering. And in the last 2 semester, some of my students were arrested, and yeah, it was such a great struggle for us. And so people start to be aware of the need to feel at ease. So in recent years, more and more people participate in activity related to mindfulness, related to body and mind, soul, something like that. So I don't know how to explain the consequences behind, but well, in order to change the culture of a place, it really takes time, and I think it starts from individuals. Yeah, so for me, I wish I can be one of the people who encourage the emphasize to focus on the to have the awareness of taking care of our mental health problem, so we can if we can be mindful, if we have a stable emotion, then we can spread this effect to people around us and also to this city. Yes. I'm sorry, it is not very academic, so sorry about that. It's just from my personal experience, personal opinion. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Any other questions?
Well, I don't want to railroad in another direction, and I also don't want to ask too many questions if other people have them, but I'm really interested to hear you guys speak about the relationship between non-dual emptiness. Do you see these as fundamentally different, or is there a lot of crossover in these two ideas? I'm just curious about how. And I should say that I'm not looking for an answer. I really don't know. I'm new to Eastern religions, less so to the practices, but I'm really just wanting to learn from you guys.
Andrea, that was between non-duality and what? I think the audio wasn't good for a second.
And emptiness.
At least in my interpretations and reading of the different traditions, I have always seen them as being utterly related to each other. That non-duality, things being interdependent, emptiness of own dependence, those things are logically related to each other. So I've always, at least in the readings that I've done, found them to co-occur, and I found them to be maybe even different ways of saying a very similar idea. So in some ways they can be almost interchangeable. I don't know if Sandy would have a different interpretation. That's at least from my point of view, from the way I've read texts and understand the traditions.
Actually, I'm not quite familiar with the religious text, but to my understanding, duality is like putting ourselves and the surrounding in a contrast position. For example, someone scold at me, oh, he is bad, I am poor, but he is my enemy. We always put things in this way. We make ourselves and the people around us, we consider them different. But actually, non-duality, I think, is to ease away this difference, to understand that, oh, I feel angry. It's not because of him or the environment. It's because of my mind. I don't know if I explained correctly, but the happiness or whether you feel like you are suffering, it just depends on our mind. Um, because of our wrong perception, we all put things in duality. So I guess non-duality is looking at things. We have no, we don't distinguish things. We have a fair mind towards different things, or we know that, oh, maybe he is just unhappy, so he expressed his anger on me. It's not because I'm bad. So I hear the voice of, I just know that I hear some sound waves of speaking loud. I don't have to take it serious. Oh, I don't need to be angry. I guess it's an example of non-duality. I don't know if I interpret it correctly, Michael.
Oh, no, absolutely, absolutely. So I think you put it exactly right. So when you create and direct dualities between yourself and others, that means that you are not recognizing the emptiness that is actually the connection between the two. When you break down the duality, you can do so by understanding that all things are interconnected and empty of own being. And so this is why the two concepts so frequently co-occur, because the problem of duality usually results from an inability or just a non-exposure to the notion of voidness or emptiness.
And for me, from my understanding, which could be backwards, but for me, non-duality and emptiness are both the source from which all things come. So in that regard, they're synonymous.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about a true heart, the Buddha believed that we can all become Buddha. We all got the form of the Buddha. However, it was like it was like having some dirt on ourselves. So it blocked our revealing of being a Buddha. So practicing meditation is try to remove the dirt from our true heart so that it can be revealed, and then our form of Buddha could be revealed. I think, yeah, it is also, yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it reminds me of this idea. Yeah. Thank you.
So Sandy, you said true heart. I'm curious about that. So is mindful reflection on emptiness and non-duality, does that steer in the direction of inactivity? Like, is it a sort of retreating contemplation, or is the end result a sort of compassion or self-care, but not in the sort of narrow sense, insofar as there's no duality truly. And this idea of the true heart, is that a reflection on the nature of reality? Is there a kind of love in the nature of reality, or I don't know. I guess I'm asking about the nature of reality.
Yes.
To get to.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Well, I remember from this Shongama Sutra, it has mentioned 10 characteristics of a true heart. True heart is unchanged, but the phenomenon around us is changing. But we always think that the phenomenon around us is the real thing. So therefore, we are in suffering. So in order to reduce the suffering, we should have a correct understanding of our true heart. And so this book is really difficult, and I'm still learning how to understand it. So, but it has mentioned the 10 characteristics of a true heart. For example, uh, 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 we are like actors on the stage. We perform a drama. We change our costumes. We change the role of we change our role of the character. However, the costume and the stage is changing. Are changing, and these are the phenomena. But the actor himself is unchanging, and it is the true heart. Uh, and another example is that true heart refers to the ocean, and the waves refer to the phenomena. The waves is changing, but it is still the ocean. Well, when we see no wave, we also think, we always think that, there is nothing. But actually, it is just a calm water. It is not nothing. I heard from Venerable's explanation about this, but still, it is so difficult for me. I could only remember these analogies. Yeah, but this book is good. I think I'm still taking time to learn about the 10 characteristic of true heart. Yeah, thank you.
I think that's a great explanation. And I would just wanted to add an analogy that I've heard you describe how compassion and love can exist within an understanding of emptiness and non-duality. I think this actually comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. Is to consider what happens if you burn your left hand, your right hand immediately will cover it. And this happens without thinking. It happens reflexively and autonomically. Why is that? Because the left and the right hand are part of the same organism. And so the idea is to, through your practice, reach a level where you see all other beings as part of the same organism as you. So when one is in pain, you react just as the right hand does to the left hand. That we are together and interconnected and joined. And so that's there is a kind of love and a compassion there. It's just at a higher level that does not reflect the I-you duality.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Is there other questions or comments for us? Yes. Oh, because yes. Oh, yes. I'm reading some Chinese book, but it is yes, a new synthetic interpretation of the Shurangama Sutra. It is the sutra that I've just mentioned. But this book is in Chinese. Yeah, but I think there could be some other English related to. It's very difficult. Whenever I listen to Venerable's explanation, I jot down the notes. It seems like I understand, but if he asks me to repeat or explain out, I feel like I'm puzzled. So I think this maybe this sutra is a bit challenging for me. I really need to pay more time to understand it. Yes, thank you. So shall we come to the end of this section? Or any other comments? Or yes.
I just wanted to thank you, Sandy, for moderating and for leading the panel.
Thank you very much, Michael. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, James.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, David. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Good health and everything.
Thank you.
And have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
I really did enjoy your presentation, Sandy. I thought that was really neat. And between the gradual and the sudden development of mindfulness, I liked how you played off that tension. So I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you. I feel sorry that I didn't know the Chinese translation, so I Google your content, so I know. Oh, it refers to this book, and I'm really a newcomer for religious text, so I really learned a lot from you. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you and for the panel with you.
My pleasure too. Thank you. Shall we just leave this session? Is it okay?
I think
Yes.
so.
I'm going to stay here, but it's okay for everyone else to leave if they would prefer.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Charlie. Bye.